Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, and thanks for coming back and checking out this video series entitled Spiritual Impacts, and we're on episode 4. And in this episode I'm going to talk about an experience I had with a foreign language in a reading, because many people have asked me, how do I communicate with someone in spirit who doesn't speak English? Because people want to know, can they still communicate with us even if we can't speak the same language? My answer is yes, based on a couple of experiences that I have personally had. And as you guys know, I only speak from my own experiences here, so it might be different to how another medium receives the information, how they communicate with people that speak a foreign language. So I'm speaking about my personal experience here, and hopefully you'll be able to gain some more insight into how it works, and it just answers your question, about how exactly does it happen. So first thing I will say is that spirit will always communicate with a medium through their own frame of reference and through their own experience. So for example, for me, when it comes to foreign languages, I like foreign languages. At school I was very good at German, and actually the highest grade I got in school was for German, not English, German. But I've always liked language. I was learning Spanish at one point. I got quite far with that. However, don't test me because I don't remember half of it. I was also learning French because I lived in France for a short amount of time. And I've recently started to learn Polish because my other half is Polish. He speaks English, but he is Polish. So I thought I'd make an attempt finally to start learning Polish. So foreign language for me is something that I like to learn, and I really wish that I was bilingual. I'm not, but because I have that experience and I see words and I can pick things up quite easily, that's in my frame of reference. So spirit will use that time to time. It's a little bit like if you are someone who is really good with numbers. Let's say you're quite analytical and quite good with numbers. In a reading, you may get loads of number references come through, whether it be a birth date, whether it be a telephone number, whether it be a door number. If you're good with breeds of dogs, for example, you will get in a reading potentially a lot of the names of breeds come forward, whereas I don't. If I get a dog come through, I just see a dog. I might get a characteristic of the dog, I might get a colour, a name, but I don't tend to get the breeds because it's not my frame of reference, so I'm not going to get it. So I'll get it in a different way. So when it comes to this particular these couple of examples, I was quite how can I say, I was a little bit taken aback by it as well, because there's no way on earth particularly in this first example that I would know the information. All right, the second example I might be more familiar with, but again it's just showing that spirit can still communicate. Now if we put language aside just for a moment, spirit will communicate with you in a way in which you're going to pick up the information, whether it be clairaudiently, clairvoyantly, clairsentiently, some of the other clairs that are there as well. So what I found is, if another spirit talks another language that I don't understand, they will give me the information in a different way. They might give me pictures so I see images instead. They might make me feel certain things rather than say things in my ear in a native tongue. But then again, in the spirit world, no, there is no language. Like there's no time, there's no sense of time, there's no sense of dates. The spirit will give things symbolically, because it is all symbolic at the end of the day. It's not necessarily giving you word for word things they want to say to you. So they'll put it across in a different way just so that I can pick it up. But on these occasions, why it came through in a foreign language, I don't really know why in those particular occasions it happened, but let's get into the example as to what did happen. So we go back to episode 1, where I talked about the lady who I gave a reading to, where her grandfather had come through with the fishing boat. Do you remember? And at this same lady, we planned to do another reading because she was happy for me to practice on her. So this example still goes back to the time that I was still very new, like a year and a half into my development. So we decided, together, that I would do another practice session, again not knowing what I would get through at all. So whether a granddad might come through again, because that's a possibility, I didn't know who would come through this time. So again, we're at work and she was sat behind me, and I will say now that she is Italian. All right, she comes from Italy. Now I have to say I've never been to Italy. Italy is one language I've never studied, never looked at. So I've got no clue on on the Italian language or anything like that. So again, I was sat at my desk, and she was sat behind me, and I was just getting on with my work. And all of a sudden, I had a couple of words come through in my mind, which for me, they felt like they sounded Italian to me, just the way they dropped in. I knew it wasn't Spanish or French or even Portuguese. I knew it sounded Italian to me, and I thought, what is this? At the same time, I felt an older lady step forward as well, and I thought to myself, now is not the time. So I tried to push them away because I was trying to get on with my own work, but it kept on coming through. The words kept coming in, so I gave into it in the end, and it sounded something like Fiono Giotto, which I'll put below. That's how it sounded to me phonetically in my head, and I thought, what is this? So I googled it. I was on a computer, so I googled it, and I got the correct spelling in the end. It was very, very close. Again, I'll put down here to what the actual spelling was, and it was the name of a patisserie, or like a patisserie bakery in Italy. Now, I've never been to Italy, as I said, I ain't got a clue. But I felt this woman, and I felt all of a sudden it was for the girl sat behind me. So I spun around in my chair and I said to her, can I ask you a question? Because something's come through to me which I don't really understand. So what is the meaning of forno Giotto? And she looked at me and kind of went white, like she's seen a ghost, no pun intended. And she kind of put a hand up to her mouth, and I sat back in my chair thinking, what have I said? And she said, Forno Giotto is the name of the bakery patisserie which my mum, in spirits, always used to go to on the way to work. And I kind of like sat open mouthed thinking, how on earth did I get that information? But it came through, so I have to accept it came through. I got it. How I got it, I didn't quite know at that particular point, but it proved at that point it was her mum coming through to me to make that communication, to say to her daughter, who she dearly loved, and obviously the feeling was mutual, that she was coming through. And however she was going to get there, she was going to get there, whether she gave me another language or whatever it was, that she wanted to come through, and that's how she got through, giving me two words in Italian. However, fast forward later on that day, we did do a reading together privately, and her mum did come through. When she came through with further information, it was all symbolic, because back then I was more clairvoyant, so I would see images and pictures and symbols and things. So, and her mum couldn't speak English when she was alive. So I was getting things in symbolically. So I saw the two colours. They had two cars in the family, and I got the exact colours of the cars. So that when she passed, how she passed, her characteristics, all that kind of stuff. So I knew. So again, her mum was giving me extra evidence to say this is me. Like we needed it, because that Forno Giotto, that still blows my mind, and that really proved it was her. But obviously, we always want more evidence to prove and to cement the fact that it is that person in spirit coming forward. So that is the first example that really blew my mind and still impacts me to this day. Now the second example was, again, it's another reading I was doing for a lady, and this time it's to do with the Spanish language. And I was communicating with this lady that's come through, and we hadn't quite established yet who she was. But all of a sudden, I heard the word llaves placed in my head. Now, because I had been learning Spanish, I knew that llaves was a Spanish word for keys. So I'm thinking, okay, why have I been given that in Spanish? I don't really know. But what I do know is, symbolically, that when I see keys, it symbolises that someone is moving house. That's just symbolically for me what it was. So anyway, fast forward a bit further into the reading, and the lady validated that yes, she was moving house. Her and her partner had just moved, or decided to move. I can't remember now, but that was definitely right. And then I thought I just say, well, why did I hear it in Spanish? Why was I given? Do you understand why I'd be given the word keys in Spanish? And she said yes, because the lady you're communicating with is my mother-in-law, who was Spanish and who only spoke Spanish. So again, it validated for me that okay, that spirit will work in their frame, in my frame of reference, and will give me things that I understand. To allow the sitter to know that it is that person coming through. But also spirit know that I like evidence. I don't like generics, I like specifics. And again, there's no way on earth I would know until that point that the lady I was communicating with was Spanish. So you can see how spirit communicate in how, you know, how they know you're going to pick up the information. And that's the lesson here, that don't be afraid to go and see a medium just because your loved one in spirit doesn't speak English or the language of the medium. That again, spirit are very clever and they will know how to get their message across, whether it be through language or through symbols or whatever it might, have feelings, whatever it might be, spirit will still get the message across. And you know, and to be honest as well, that we're not meant to get the every bit of information 100%. So if I communicate with a spirit person, a bit like with the Italian, they might give me a word that I'm not going to understand because it's not, I have no clue about the language. So if I had a speaker come through, a communicator come through who was Russian, and they gave me a Russian word, I ain't got a clue what that is. What they might give to me is something that sounds close to the words phonetically, and then hopefully the sitter will be able to understand what that word is. But it doesn't always come through as clear as a bell. And I think people out there just have to understand that if a foreign language does come through, it's going to be in a way in which the medium is going to pick it up. So it might be they'll give note that how it sounds phonetically. It might not be exactly what it is, but phonetically it will sound very similar. So it does work, but you know, not every medium is going to get a different language come through. Again, if it's not in their frame of reference, they're not going to pick it up. Whereas for me, I'm lucky that I do like language, and I have looked at different languages and studied different languages. So for me, not because it's easy, because it's never easy, but I'm more likely to pick up the sounds or the phonetics. Having said that though, they're the only 2 times that I can really remember out of all the readings that I've done that a language ever come through. So it's funny, it's not, but it makes sense because I was doing another video on maybe development, is that, you know, as a medium you will develop and you will start receiving information in different ways, in clearer ways, and it's always going to expand, and your awareness is going to increase, so you are going to receive information in different ways. So for any of you that are learning at the moment, again, just be aware, I might have said this in a previous video, that your senses will be very different in a year's time to what they are now. You will pick up information differently in another year's time to where you are now. So you may not pick up things the same way at all in a year, 2 years, 5 years time. It changes and it evolves. But I hope this video helped. I hope it helped to answer some questions that some of you have about, you know, how does spirit communicate with us if they don't speak the same language. Because as you can see, hopefully you can see that it still works. Whatever way, it still works. But yeah, I hope you found it interesting, and hopefully I'll see you in the very next episode. So until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all very soon.